All right, good evening. My name is Nick Cook, and I'm going to be presenting on my research project. So the goal or the title of my project is going to be comparison of the effects of training two different squat techniques on Olympic-style weightlifting performance. So just to start off, it's kind of a background of the issue. So in the Olympic-style weightlifting world, there's a discussion basically between these two main squat styles of the back squat, namely the high bar squat and the low bar squat. Excuse me, I have a very sore throat. And between the two styles, there's some key technique differences that may alter the way that the body adapts to the stimulus. Different muscles are engaged. And as we go through this presentation, hopefully you gain a little bit of insight on what those might be and what that might be, and why I believe this study needs to be done. Now, the names you see on the screen here are going to be some of the main proponents of the different squat styles. Namely, the top you're going to see Mark Rippetoe. He believes that the back squat exercise is a general strength exercise, and that is all it is for. And because of that, you should be lifting in a way that's going to allow you to lift the most weight in order to best prepare yourself to compete in your sport. And that is in contrast to these two coaches right below him, Glenn Penley and Greg Everett. Both have coached national champions and several world team members. So those coaches have coached several world team members, and they argue that strength is specific. And there are going to be there's going to be one source later on that backs this up. Oh, excuse me. And so ultimately, what we're trying to evaluate here in this research project is going to be the effectiveness of the low bar squat and the high bar squat with regards to performance in the sport of Olympic weightlifting. See, my research question and the purpose of my study are very similar. Main question that I'm trying to answer is, does the low bar squat allow for similar or greater strength increases in the competition lifts, the snatch and the clean and jerk, as the high bar squat does? This also might be referred to as one rep max performance, competition performance, and you can see the purpose of my study is pretty much the research question restated, and it's to identify, basically to answer that question. Now, for those outside of the weightlifting community, this question might not really seem too important. Oh my gosh. Excuse the break, excuse the changing clothes. I had to take my jacket off. It's very hot. So an outsider to the sport of weightlifting might not see a huge difference between squatting with a low bar style or squatting with a high bar style. However, depending on the results of this study, we could see a drastic change in the way weightlifters train, or at least the way that certain built weightlifters change. It might allow for lifters with longer or less than ideal anthropometry to squat or train in a way that is going to keep them healthier or allow them to develop greater amounts of strength that they wouldn't be able to otherwise. The low bar squat, due to the technique, allows for a lifter with longer femurs in relation to their tibia and their upper body to squat heavier with less strain on the knees and sometimes the lower back. This particular topic, lots of coaches have observed that the high bar squat translates better to performance in the lifts, but there hasn't been, at least I cannot find, a lot of concrete data stating that this is the case. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence, a lot of observational data. There's very little of it is recorded in a way that we can duplicate. Okay, so I believe, so what we've got on the screen here is going to be what I believe are the most important limitations, delimitations, and the assumptions that I'm going to be operating under. So for the delimitations, basically the scope, it's going to be athletes that understand the lifts. So this is not going to be intermediate athletes, and these are not going to be, these are not going to be novice athletes, and these are not going to be highly advanced athletes. And I will go into the reason for this later, but the other reason, the other scope question or delimitation is going to be that my volunteers need to be free from major injury. Now, I believe that the reason for this should be pretty clear. As we move through to limitations, one of the biggest limitations that I'm going to come across is going to be time, and that's going to be because not everyone necessarily responds to the same program in the same ways, and for person A, they might see strength gains within 4 weeks. Another person might not see them till week 8, and some might not see them for the entire duration. And it might not be because the style of squat is poor. It might be because that particular workout program is not perfectly geared towards what they need. It might have too high of intensity, might not have enough intensity, too much volume, not enough volume, too much frequency, not enough frequency. And I'm going to be operating under the assumption that my volunteers are going to remain healthy. They're not going to suffer any catastrophic injuries causing them to drop out, and that a 12-week workout cycle is going to be sufficient to see significant strength increases or lack thereof. Now, I'm going to be operating under the hypothesis that for an intermediate athlete, there will not be a significant difference between the for the intermediate athlete, the style of squat prescribed will not significantly impact 1RM performance in the snatch and clean and jerk. Meaning, between whether the athlete is performing the low bar squat or the high bar squat, they're going to see similar increases in their competition lifts. Now, we're going to be operating with just a couple definitions here. The competition lifts refer to specifically the snatch and clean and jerk. Okay, so operational definitions. Competition lifts are the snatch and clean and jerk. 1RM is a 1 repetition maximum. Moving on, we've got the barbell squat. The literature shows that strength is joint angle specific, meaning that the angles that your body is going to be in sport, in your chosen sport, those are the angles that you want to be training. If your knee, like in a sprint, if you're spending a lot of time at 40 degrees of knee flexion, then you want to train that so that your knee extensors at 40 degrees are super. The high bar squat, the bar is on the traps, the torso is more upright, there's more forward knee flexion, more forward knee, more horizontal knee movement, less horizontal hip movement. It's the opposite for the low bar squat. Competition lifts, the snatch and clean and jerk. These were formalized in 1972. Prior to that, there was the clean and press. The clean and press in addition to the current 2 lifts. Snatch is a 1 motion lift. It demands extreme amounts of flexibility. Clean and jerk is a 2 motion lift. The bar starts on the floor. You lift it to the shoulders, then you lift it overhead. Heavier weights are used because of this. It also demands a similar amount of flexibility, but not quite as much as the snatch. Now, one thing that's interesting to note, There are very few easily accessible studies that are related to the training of weightlifters. There are some, but a lot of what we see is training for sport in general. We've got training for football players, soccer, all of it. Very few specifically with the training for weightlifters. And the necessary part about that is that for other sports, their sport training is not as demanding as their time in the gym. They aren't handling near maximum loads like weightlifters are. Weightlifters, their sport training is weight training, and that takes a very different toll on the body. We need to be able to monitor that. Many of the studies that involve weightlifters deal with either elites or novices. My target is the intermediate population, where we're going to be able to see some of the bigger differences whenever we look at the low bar versus the high bar squat. Now, the study I want to perform is going to be an experimental design. This is 100% necessary. There's no way to get around it. If we're going to look at based on genetics and the way the body works, using one group and training the two different styles of squats sequentially, this might yield completely different results than if we just take two separate groups, or in my case, three, and have one group train the high bar, one group train the low bar, and one group just not squat. They're going to be doing everything but the squatting. And this is because strength gains are non-linear past the novice stage. Once you get to the intermediate stage, there is a need to alter stimulus rather than just put more weight on the bar. My goal participant for the study is going to be male or female, aged 18 to 35. This is going to be key because it is going to be towards the tail end of the pubescent stage, so there's going to be less hormonal changes, and it's going to be before the severe testosterone drop-off, especially in men at the age of 35. Their skill level is going to be proficient. They're going to be good at the lifts, not necessarily super strong, but good at the lifts, and they're going to meet the qualifying total of the American Open Series in their respective weight class. They're going to be recruited from online forums, volunteers that are found in the local area. I'm going to be using a Gillick tape measure to measure anthropometry and what is called a bar sensei to measure to measure bar speed and trajectory on the lifts. It's going to be attached to a barbell connected to an iPhone. All right, so the study will end up being submitted to the California Baptist University's Institutional Review Board for a full review. And since the study obviously hasn't been conducted yet, a power analysis will be conducted to determine the minimum sample size. Now, in order to, as we actually do the study, these are the steps I'm going to follow. We've gone over recruitment. My study will be a randomized selection after we've recruited, gotten our pool of volunteers. It's going to be a randomized selection, an equal number of men and women, and they will be randomly placed into one of three groups: the high bar squat, the low bar squat group, or the no squat group. Once they've been selected and notified, there will be two testing sessions. They would take place 72 hours apart. The first session will be just the back squat. They will test their 1 rep max, and then 72 hours later, they will test the competition lifts, the snatch, and the clean and jerk. Training, the actual study will be the athletes training 3 times a week for 12 weeks. The week after 12 weeks will be a mirror of the first week, in which we will do the back squat and the competition lifts. Everything is going to be done on Microsoft Excel. The bar sensei is going to take some valuable data, and we're going to use that and see and look at other things besides just 1 rep max. Maybe bar speed increase more with the high bar squat or the back squat or the low bar squat, even though maxes stay the same. That might be something we can look at as well. And thank you guys for watching.